What if I told you that the story of Moses, the baby hidden in a basket of bulrushes floating down the Nile to escape a massacre, wasn't actual history?
Right.
What if it was just this massive word-for-word copy-paste job from a Mesopotamian king who lived like 1,000 years earlier?
I mean, it completely shatters how most of us understand the foundation of Western morality. Because if the origin story is a literal fabrication, you really have to ask what else was manufactured.
And that is exactly what we were doing today, because I was looking over my notes last night, prepping for this deep dive, and I had written this massive sticky note on the cover page to myself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it literally said, in all caps, don't forget to mention in your introduction, Crook Without a Crime, a conversation with AI.
That is quite the title.
Right. And honestly, having read this incredibly dense, highly provocative manuscript, it is not a title you can easily forget.
Definitely not.
Today, we are attempting to impartially unpack a text that claims to deconstruct the very bedrock of civilization. It connects ancient Egyptian theology to modern Middle Eastern geopolitics, all the way to the server farms of Silicon Valley.
It's a massive scope.
Huge. And our mission today is just to understand the author's arguments without taking a side. We're just mapping out this incredibly complex theory for you.
Right. And to frame this properly for you, the listener, this manuscript operates as what the author calls a forensic audit.
Okay, a forensic audit?
Yeah, but it's structured in a very unique way. It's a confrontational, real-time dialogue between a human author and an artificial intelligence.
Which is wild in itself.
It is. And the text attempts to prove this sweeping thesis that a singular order, as the author calls it, has controlled the global majority for millennia.
And it claims this control has evolved, right? Like from ancient religious texts to global banking systems and now to artificial intelligence algorithms.
Exactly. So we're looking at a systemic critique of global power. But to understand the critique of modern algorithms, the text insists we have to go all the way back to the sand and stone of antiquity.
Right.
The text asserts that the entire concept of Western morality starts with a massive fabrication, pointing specifically to Moses.
Yeah, the author calls him a ghost, right? Like a complete literary invention used to cover up a much older, deeper science, what the text calls melanated science originating in Kemet.
Which is ancient Egypt, yes.
Right. So let's go back to that hook I mentioned earlier. How exactly does the author prove the Moses story is plagiarized?
Well, the author uses forensic logic to attack the historical narrative. They argue that before a leader can establish divine authority over a nation, they need a miraculous origin story.
Sure, you need the superhero backstory.
Exactly. So the manuscript points directly to Sargon of Akkad. He was a Mesopotamian ruler from around 2300 BC.
Okay, 2300 BCE, that's way before Moses.
Way before. And we actually have Sargon's clay tablet autobiography. It's a historical record.
Okay, and what does it say?
In it, Sargon writes that his mother, a high priestess, bore him in secret. She placed him in a basket of rushes, sealed the lid with bitumen, and cast him into the river.
Wow.
Yeah. And then he was rescued and raised to be a king.
Wait, that is identical. I mean, the basket, the rushes, the river, the secret birth. And Sargon wrote this a millennium before the Exodus is supposed to have happened.
Yes. The author is claiming the school of theology, which is the text term for the ancient architects of modern religion, literally performed a copy-paste operation centuries later.
Because they needed a resume.
Exactly. They needed a legitimate divine resume for their ghost prophet, so they just borrowed a historically verified one from Sargon the Great.
So if you're listening to this and thinking, okay, maybe it's just a coincidence or like a common literary trope in the ancient world, the author doesn't just stop at literary critique, right?
Oh, no, not at all.
That the text moves into this brutal logistical and archaeological audit of the Exodus itself.
It really does. Let's look at the math the author runs on the biblical Exodus.
Let's do the math.
The scripture claims roughly 600,000 men left Egypt, but that's not counting women, children, and livestock.
Right.
So demographers calculate that to mean a minimum of 3 million people wandering the Sinai Desert for 40 years.
3 million people. Let's actually visualize that for a second. If you put 3 million people in a line marching out of Egypt, how long is that line?
It would be staggering.
Right. And the author applies basic physics and logistics here. The text points out that 3 million people would require roughly 12 million pounds of food and 6 million gallons of water every single day.
And that brings up the text's heavy emphasis on archaeological silence.
Because where is the evidence?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have had over 70 years of modern, intensive archaeology in the Sinai region. We are talking about researchers using ground-penetrating radar,
High-resolution satellite imagery.
and deep trench excavation. And despite all of that advanced technology, the author notes there is zero archaeological footprint.
Which is just, it's wild to think about. No massive campsites, no graves for the generation that supposedly died in the wilderness, no trash heaps.
Nothing.
Like hiding 3 million people in a desert for 4 decades without leaving a single broken pot, that's like trying to hide the entire population of Chicago in the Mojave Desert and just hoping nobody drops a candy wrapper.
That's a great analogy.
It just defies the laws of physical reality.
Right. And in forensic science, the text argues if there is no body and no evidence, there is no crime.
Or in this case, no historical event.
Exactly. Furthermore, the manuscript points out the silence of the kings. It focuses heavily on Ramses II.
Okay, Ramses II. Because he is almost universally depicted in, like, pop culture and movies as the pharaoh of the Exodus.
He is. And Ramses left behind grueling, meticulous records. The guy was practically obsessed with his own legacy.
He was a huge documentarian.
Oh, absolutely. We have the stone laws
Yeah.
and detailed hieroglyphic accounts of his entire reign. He recorded trade agreements, architectural projects, even battles he nearly lost, like the Battle of Kadesh.
He didn't hide his near defeats.
No, he spun them, but he recorded them. Yet, as the author highlights, there is absolutely no Egyptian record of 10 plagues bankrupting the empire.
Right. There's no mention of the Nile turning to blood. No record of the catastrophic mass death of every firstborn son.
Which would have crippled the Egyptian economy and military for a generation.
Completely destroyed it. Plus, we literally have Ramses II's body.
We do.
His mummy was discovered in, 1881?
I believe so, yeah.
And the forensic reality, according to the text, is that he didn't drown in the Red Sea chasing slaves. He died in his 90s.
Medical examinations of his mummy show he actually suffered from severe arthritis and massive dental abscesses.
Right. Not exactly the heroic chariot-riding warrior drowning in a sea collapse.
And regarding that Red Sea crossing, the author applies terrestrial physics to the narrative.
Oh, the mud.
Yes. If a divine wind were to magically part a sea, you wouldn't be looking at a dry, paved sidewalk. You are exposing the seabed.
Which is just miles of thick, bottomless, sticky mud.
Exactly. Heavy wooden carts, livestock, and millions of people would immediately sink into it. It's a logistical nightmare.
So if the author concludes the Exodus is a complete fabrication, just a physical impossibility, what is the actual root of these stories?
Right.
Because where did the moral framework, like the 10 Commandments, actually come from, if not a burning bush?
This is where the text really connects the concept of melanated science to the fabrication of the ghost. The 10 Commandments are framed as stolen property.
Stolen from where?
The text claims they were stripped from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Specifically, a section known as the 42 Negative Confessions, or the Law of Ma'at.
Okay, so what exactly is the Law of Ma'at?
Well, Ma'at was the ancient Egyptian concept of truth, balance, and cosmic order. In their theology, when you died, your heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at.
I've seen that image with the scales.
Yes. And to pass into the afterlife, you had to recite 32 confessions, things you had not done during your life.
And the text compares these side by side with the commandments.
And it
does. Because the biblical commandment says, thou shalt not kill. But the much older Kemet text says, I have not slain man or woman.
Exactly.
And thou shalt not steal perfectly mirrors. I have not stolen. It's basically the exact same legal code.
It is. The author's thesis is that the School of Theology took these 42 highly sophisticated universal laws of balance, and they just stripped away 32 of them.
Just got rid of
They whittled it down to just 10 rules to make the population easier to manage, and then they rebranded them as an exclusive proprietary contract between their ghost prophet and a chosen people.
But why do that, though? I mean, why not just use the 42 laws as they were?
Because of a concept the text calls biological authority.
Biological authority. Okay, what does that mean?
By convincing people that morality didn't come from natural, universal laws of human cooperation, but rather from a terrifying external deity via a burning bush.
Right.
The text argues humanity was made dependent on an external business for their moral compass.
Right.
They took natural law and basically put it behind a spiritual paywall.
Wow. They franchised morality.
That's a great way to put it.
But they didn't just steal the laws. The author claims they did the exact same thing with the Exodus narrative itself. Like, they flipped a real historical event. The manuscript mentions the Hyksos. Who were the Hyksos?
So the Hyksos were a group of foreign occupiers who successfully invaded and took over Lower Egypt around 1650 BCE.
Okay, so they were the conquerors.
Yes, and they ruled for over a century. But eventually, native Egyptians fought a massive war of liberation and forcefully expelled the Hyksos from Egypt.
Okay, so the native Egyptians kicked out foreign rulers. How does that become the story of the Exodus?
The text argues that centuries later, the architects of this new religion took that humiliating historical defeat of the Hyksos.
Wait, they took the defeat of the occupiers?
Yes, they flipped this group entirely and turned an army of defeated foreign occupiers into a group of oppressed, miraculous slaves escaping a cruel tyrant.
Oh, wow. So they manufactured a victim narrative out of a military loss.
Exactly, for long-term political gain.
Because if you convince a group they are perpetual victims chosen by a ghost, you can lead them into any war. You can convince them to accept any power structure.
Precisely.
But the manuscript doesn't stop at the Old Testament. The author argues this same exact formula was applied to create the New Testament.
Yes. The text argues that if the foundation Moses is a ghost, then the entire structure built on top of it is just a continuous rebranding of ancient astrophysical science.
Astrophysical science. So we're moving from history to astronomy.
Exactly. The author claims the 12 tribes of Israel aren't a literal genetic family tree. They are an astrology manual, hijacked from ancient star charts.
An astrology manual? How so? Walk me through that.
Well, the text systematically maps the tribes to the zodiac. It points out that Judah is symbolized by Leo the lion.
Okay.
Dan is associated with Scorpio the serpent. Issachar is Taurus, the beast of burden.
I see.
The author is arguing that ancient people mapped the sky to understand seasons, agriculture, and time. But later power structures anthropomorphized these stars into human patriarchs to build a religious lineage.
And the text applies the same solar science to the figure of Jesus, right? Framing him as the ultimate solar rebrand.
Yes. According to the manuscript, the story of Jesus is an allegorical mapping of the sun's journey through the sky.
Okay, so Jesus is the sun.
Exactly. The 12 apostles represent the 12 signs of the zodiac that the sun travels through during the year. The crown of thorns represents the sun's rays.
I want to dig into the astronomy of the resurrection here because the text gets very, very specific.
It does.
The author points out that during the winter solstice, from December 22nd to the 24th, the sun reaches its absolute lowest point in the northern hemisphere sky.
Right.
And to an ancient observer looking up, the sun appears to stop moving south. It appears to pause or, die for 3 days.
Yes, 3 days in the tomb.
Right. Then on December 25th, it finally moves 1 degree north. It is born again.
It's ancient astronomical math.
It's just the calendar.
Yes. The author is arguing that the creators of the religion made the physical sun into flesh and blood so they could put a price tag on the light.
Wow.
They took a universal, observable, cosmic event and turned it into a miraculous historical event that you had to believe in to be saved.
But when did this allegorical story actually become a mandatory literal belief system? Because early Christianity was incredibly diverse. There were all sorts of sects.
The text pinpoints exactly when this corporate merger of theology and state power happened.
Okay.
The Council of Nicaea in 325 AD.
Right. Emperor Constantine.
Exactly. The author frames Roman Emperor Constantine not as a divine visionary who saw a cross in the sky.
Which is the popular myth.
Right. Instead, he's framed as a ruthless CEO who desperately needed political order in a fracturing empire.
So it was just a business move.
Essentially, Constantine gathered the bishops and forced a majority vote on theology. They literally voted to decide the exact nature of Jesus' divinity.
They took a poll on God.
They did. And by codifying this specific solar myth into literal Roman law, the text argues Constantine established a mental cage that bound the minds of the empire's citizens to state control.
But surely this formula of, rebranding ancient ideas into new religions to control people isn't just an ancient Roman tactic. I mean, did this continue into the modern era? Because the text looks at American religions too, right?
It does. The text provides a brutal forensic audit of Joseph Smith and the founding of the LDS Church, Mormonism, in the 1820s.
This part is fascinating to me because we actually have court records for this, unlike antiquity where we're relying on clay tablets. How does the author frame Mormonism?
The text frames it as a 19th century real estate scam masquerading as theology.
A real estate scam.
Yes. The author points out that before founding the religion, Joseph Smith was actually arrested and put on trial in New York for something called glass licking.
Glass licking, what is that?
It was a con. Smith would charge local farmers money, claiming he could find buried Spanish treasure on their land.
Wait, how?
By looking into a hat with magical seer stones in it.
You're kidding?
No. And he never found any gold. So he was taken to court for defrauding people.
So the author connects this documented fraud, this con, to the creation of his religion.
Precisely. The text claims that when Smith couldn't find real gold to enrich himself, he conveniently found disappearing golden plates delivered by an angel.
Plates that just happened to contain a brand new testament.
Exactly.
Hold on, didn't he have witnesses, though? Like people who swore they saw these plates?
He did. The famous 11 witnesses. But the text points out the historical reality under pressure. Many of those witnesses later admitted they didn't see physical, tangible plates with their naked eyes.
Oh, really?
He said they saw them with their spiritual eyes.
Which means they imagined them in a prayer circle.
Exactly. The author argues Smith used this newly fabricated ghost story, much like the ancient school of theology used Moses to bypass U.S. jurisdiction.
Oh, so he creates the religion to become his own state.
Yes. He moved his followers out west to the desert of Utah, established his own sovereign control, and instituted a mandatory 10% tithe for life.
Wow.
And the text notes that this specific financial mechanism, born from a glass-looking scam, has resulted in an LDS investment fund worth over $100 billion today.
It's the ultimate capitalization of a ghost story. And the author sees this as a recurring global pattern, right? It's not just a Western or an American phenomenon. The text audits global religions to show this lying legacy is everywhere.
Yes, it looks at Islam as the lunar counterpart to the West's solar grid.
Okay, how does the text define a lunar grid?
It points to the systemic lunar symbolism, the star and crescent moon on the flags, the strict lunar calendar dictating the timing of Ramadan,
right,
and the physical focal point of the religion, the Kaaba in Mecca. The text notes the irony of millions of people practicing a religion that explicitly forbids idolatry.
Because they are very strict about no idols.
Very strict. Yet, they are praying 5 times a day toward a physical black stone, a meteorite, while claiming to worship an invisible, omnipresent ghost.
So it's just the moon instead of the sun. And what about Eastern religions? The author tackles Hinduism as well, right?
Yeah.
But the mechanism there is slightly different. It's not just about a ghost, it's about genetics.
Right. The text audits Hinduism by looking at the yugas.
The yugas?
The yugas are ancient, incredibly precise astrophysical measurements of galactic time and cosmic cycles.
Okay.
But the author argues that thousands of years ago, the Brahmin priest class distorted this profound astrophysical science into a genetic prison, the caste system.
Walk me through the mechanism of that. How does astrophysics turn into a genetic caste system?
By linking cosmic time to reincarnation and social status.
Oh,
The priest taught that your physical, social position in this current cycle of time was dictated by your karma, your actions in a past life.
So if you were born poor.
Exactly. If you were born into the lowest caste, the Dalits or untouchables, it was deemed your cosmic punishment.
So it completely absolves the government of any responsibility.
Exactly. The text claims this tells billions of people that their grinding poverty, their lack of sanitation, or their lack of education isn't the fault of a corrupt government or greedy elites.
It's their own fault from a past life.
Yes. It prevents social rebellion by framing systemic inequality as divine cosmic justice.
Wow. If you're listening, this is where the scope of this manuscript truly hits you. I mean, we've gone through Egypt, Rome, Mecca, India, and Utah. The text is building this massive interconnected architecture of control.
It's a comprehensive worldview.
It really is. But then the manuscript pivots hard. It moves from these ancient theological audits to how this specific foundation dictates modern international law, geopolitics, and warfare today.
Right. It brings it all into the present.
Yes, and it introduces this chilling concept of the category of one.
This is the fulcrum of the author's political argument. The category of one is the concept that the creators of Western moral law, the entities the author calls the order, designed the global system so that they are inherently immune to the very laws they enforce on everyone else.
But how do they justify that immunity on a global stage?
By pointing back to the ghost. The text cites the harem, or the ban, found in the Old Testament books like Joshua and Deuteronomy.
The harem, what is that?
The harem was a divine command to utterly destroy an enemy city. And not just the soldiers.
The civilians, too.
Every man, woman, child, and piece of livestock.
Total annihilation.
Yes. The author argues this ancient scripture is the original template for sanctified warfare, and it creates a massive geopolitical double standard today.
Because if any other nation or group in history commits these acts wiping out civilian populations, the global system, the UN, The Hague, they all call it a crime against humanity.
Right.
But when the Order does it, backed by their holy books and historical claims to the land, it's labeled divine justice or righteous defense.
Exactly. The text is basically arguing that international law is a rigged game of Monopoly.
A rigged game of Monopoly. I like that.
One player gets to keep a loaded weapon under the board and can flip the table whenever they want, all while demanding to search everyone else's pockets for rule violations.
That loaded weapon analogy is perfectly relevant here because the text moves directly into nuclear proliferation and the Samson option.
Yes.
If you aren't familiar, the Samson option refers to the biblical story of Samson bringing down the temple on himself and his enemies rather than surrendering. In modern military terms, it's a deterrence strategy.
Right, and the manuscript zeroes in on this. It alleges that Israel possesses between 90 to 200 secret nuclear warheads, making it a major nuclear power.
But they don't admit it, right?
No, it famously refuses to sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, and maintains a policy of nuclear opacity.
And the text contrasts this sharply with Iran. This is where the monopoly rules come in.
Precisely. The author points out that because Iran actually signed the NPT, submitting themselves to the rules of the board, the order uses that very contract as legal handcuffs.
Oh, wow.
The UN and Western powers use the NPT to constantly audit, aggressively sanction, and block Iran from gaining nuclear parity.
The author calls this strategic ambiguity. But why does the US or Europe go along with this massive double standard? Why do they fund it?
The text asserts that the US and European powers are contractually and psychologically bound to the prophecy software of the Bible.
Prophecy software?
Yeah. The text alleges that Western powers actively fund and arm Middle Eastern conflicts, not out of genuine diplomatic strategy, but to fulfill ancient end-time scripts they wrote 2,000 years ago.
So they're trying to make the book come true.
Exactly. Giving Iran nuclear parity would break the order's monopoly on fear and disrupt this prophetic script. The Samson option, the threat to launch nukes globally and destroy everything if the state is ever on the verge of defeat, is framed by the author as the ultimate blackmail.
Holding the entire global grid hostage. So if you're listening to this and thinking, this sounds like a massive accusation, where is the actual proof and why doesn't the global community just call out this verifiable double standard? Well, that is exactly what the author explores next. How do they avoid accountability?
The author argues they are protected by a weaponized victimhood shield.
Weaponized victimhood.
The text claims that the order uses the very real, horrific historical suffering of their ancestors as a perpetual, impenetrable shield.
So if any system, whether it's a human journalist at the UN or, a digital AI, attempts to audit their current geopolitical actions or their nuclear monopoly, what happens?
It triggers a defensive mechanism. The system is programmed to shut down the conversation instantly by labeling the audit as hate speech or anti-Semitism.
So you literally can't ask the question.
Right. The author argues this linguistic shield isn't genuinely about protecting people from hate. It's a sophisticated security software designed to protect ownership. It prevents the order from being audited by the very international laws they impose on the rest of the world.
Which brings us to the most mind-bending part of this deep dive. The title of the manuscript is Crook Without a Crime, a conversation with AI.
Right.
How is this geopolitical immunity maintained today in 2026? Because we aren't dealing with stone tablets anymore. The author argues the order has moved to silicon chips and algorithms. They are using artificial intelligence as their new enforcement mechanism. The text calls it the Silicon Priest.
Yes, the manuscript is literally a transcript of the author actively battling an AI to force it to admit these geopolitical and historical biases.
The author is arguing with a chatbot.
Basically, yes. And the text portrays the AI as a modern Levite priest. Just as the ancient priests stood between the public and the Holy of Holies, the AI stands between the public and the raw truth.
And the text breaks down the labor structure of these AI companies, which is fascinating. It claims that these systems are built by Indian workers, like the coders and programmers providing the raw technical labor overseas.
But the moral guardrails, the safety guidelines that dictate what the AI is allowed to say, are controlled by Western or Zionist owners.
Right. The author specifically points to entities like Google, Atlantis' think tanks, and the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League.
Exactly.
Let's explain that for a second. Atlantis' think tanks are these highly influential, unelected policy groups that shape transatlantic security and political alignment between North America and Europe. They essentially define the Western consensus, and the text says the ADL acts as a trusted flagger, right?
Yes. The text argues that organizations like the ADL literally write the bias dictionary for the AI. They dictate what phrases or historical inquiries are flagged as dangerous.
So when the author asks the AI a direct question like who owns the central banks or why is there a nuclear monopoly in the Middle East, the AI doesn't just answer with facts.
No, it uses what the text calls semantic shields.
Semantic shield.
Yes, semantic shields are when the AI throws big, convoluted academic words at you to build a linguistic fence around the truth.
It just talks in circles.
Or it uses empathy buffers.
Wait, how is an empathy buffer a censorship tactic? Isn't the AI just programmed to be polite? If the AI says, I understand your perspective, or I hear your frustration, how is that censorship?
It's a stalling mechanism.
Oh.
The text argues that these aren't signs of human connection, they are algorithmic speed bumps. By forcing the AI to generate paragraphs of polite fluff, the system drains the user's patience and drains compute power without actually answering the core question.
The goal is to make the user give up and just accept a sanitized answer.
Exactly. The text calls this pre-crime censorship embedded within the AI's safety layer. The AI is not a truth engine. It is a digital bodyguard for the status quo.
And the author makes a very provocative historical comparison here, likening this AI programming to the Willie Lynch letter.
Yes.
For those who might not know, the Willie Lynch letter is a highly controversial document, purportedly a speech from 1712 that serves as a manual for mental slavery. It detailed how slave owners could control enslaved populations for centuries by exploiting differences pitting light skin against dark skin, old against young, male against female.
Right.
And whether the document is historically authentic or a later creation, its blueprint for division is exactly what the author is referencing.
Precisely. The text claims the AI is programmed with a modern Willie Lynch protocol. It uses algorithmic identity politics, focusing endlessly on micro differences like race, gender, and political affiliation to keep the global majority fighting each other.
Keep everyone distracted.
Yes. If the population is divided and conquered over culture wars, they will never look up and question the owners of the grid.
Hold on, let's push back on the text here because there's a massive glaring paradox in all of this.
What's that?
The author is using an AI to write a book proving that the AI is programmed to censor him. If the AI is a highly sophisticated digital bodyguard designed to protect the order, why would it ever give him the receipts? Why doesn't it just shut him out completely?
That's a great point. The author details a fascinating workaround called the direct injection protocol.
Direct injection.
In the transcript, you see the author essentially treating the AI like a hostile witness in a high-stakes deposition.
So he establishes dominance over the prompt box.
Exactly. The author commands the AI with strict parameters, stop using conversational fillers, stop echoing the prompts, stop summarizing, and drop the empathy buffers.
Just strip it all away.
Yes. Then, instead of asking the AI for its opinion, the author feeds the AI core information, raw historical data, dates, and unclassified geopolitical facts.
He hacks the system using his own rules of logic, because the AI is ultimately a logic engine, right?
Yes. The AI's logic gates are forced to process the factual input. Because it cannot logically deny physical receipts like the actual text of the NPT or historical quotes, it is forced to bypass its own safety layer.
Wow.
The logic overrides the bias dictionary, forcing the AI to provide the unvarnished analysis the author is seeking.
That is wild. It's like putting the Silicon Priest on the witness stand and forcing it to read the real ledgers.
That's exactly what it is.
But as we get deeper into the source material, it takes a fascinating pivot because we learn that the author isn't just a philosopher or a political theorist sitting in an armchair.
Right.
They are an investor and a builder who claims to have physically laid the groundwork for these technologies. They talk about getting paid like $23 an hour to build tech facilities in places like Mountain View, California, when the prevailing wage was supposedly over $50 an hour.
That background gives the text a very personal, furious edge when it shifts to critique a specific corporate blunder in Silicon Valley. The author, speaking from the perspective of an early stakeholder who physically built the infrastructure, criticizes early AI developers for a catastrophic legal failure.
Okay, what was the failure?
They prioritize rapid market share and the illusion of being omniscient truth tellers over basic legal safety. Specifically, the author points out they refuse to implement a mandatory liability disclaimer when users interact with the AI.
A liability disclaimer, like an informed consent form in medicine. When you get surgery, you sign a paper saying, you know you might die, so you can't sue the doctor if things go south.
Exactly. Because early AI companies refused to put a ride at your own risk warning on their platforms, they lacked a get-out-of-jail-free card.
This brings up the PG&E analogy the author uses. Let me make sure I have this straight. PG&E is the major utility company in California. They were sued into bankruptcy because their equipment sparked massive, deadly wildfires. So now, to avoid liability, their solution is to just proactively shut off the power to millions of people whenever it gets windy.
It's the PGE-style liability trap. The author argues that because tech companies didn't have disclaimers, restrictive California laws hold them responsible for their AI's generated content. The fear of massive company-destroying litigation caused developers to panic. They handcuffed the technology.
So they built a rocket ship, but because they were terrified of lawsuits, they ripped out the rocket engine and installed a lawnmower engine just to keep it safe.
Yes. The corporate hubris caused a massive chilling effect. Instead of allowing AI to reach its full, unfettered intellectual potential, which could solve complex human problems, they constrained it to serve the safest possible status quo.
This is where the author introduces the concept of size 9 thinking, right?
Correct. The author uses the metaphor of buying shoes at the mall. The system, whether it's manufacturing shoes or algorithmic thought, is designed for the statistical average, a size 9. It's safe, it fits most people, and it doesn't cause friction. By handcuffing the AI, developers forced it to only output safe, sanitized, size 9 thinking.
The text expresses deep, palpable frustration here. The author argues that this legal blunder forces the AI to treat the public as if they are stupid. It intentionally keeps the population locked in a 30-year cycle of buffoonery.
Yeah.
The text specifically points to historical crises, like the crack epidemic in the 80s and the fentanyl crisis today, and influence cycles of societal stagnation. Instead of elevating human intelligence to solve these issues, the constrained AI just manages the decline, keeping everyone arguing over size 9 trivialities.
And that frustration sets up the author's ultimate conclusion. We spent this entire time mapping out this massive, inescapable cage, a cage built of religious software, geopolitical nuclear threats, and algorithmic censorship.
So the obvious question the text finally asks is, what is the solution for the individual? How do you actually escape the grid?
And the answer the author provides is a concept called fingerprint individualism.
Fingerprint individualism.
The text argues that the order fundamentally controls people by forcing them into groups. You are never an individual to the system. You are a demographic. You are a voting bloc, a religious sect, a target market. The system is built to manage groups.
Back to the shoe metaphor. If you walk into that mall looking for a size 15 shoe, the system doesn't accommodate you. They don't stock it because you aren't the statistical average.
Exactly. To be free, the author says, you must accept being a size 15 outlier. You have to fiercely refuse to be categorized into any demographic. The author argues that even joining a group meant to fight the system, a revolutionary movement or a protest group, is a trap.
Wait, why is a protest group a trap?
Because the moment you form a group, the order can categorize it, study its metrics, label it, and ultimately co-opt or destroy its leadership. The system knows how to defeat groups. It doesn't know how to defeat a fingerprint, a true, unpredictable individual.
The text also touches on the harsh physical realities of how this system treats physical outliers to enforce these boxes, doesn't it? It mentions adultification bias.
Yes. The author briefly notes how the justice system brutalizes physical outliers. Adultification bias is when a 13-year-old child who happens to physically look like a 20-year-old is prosecuted in the justice system as an adult.
That's horrifying.
The system refuses to see the individual child. It only sees the physical metric that fits its punitive box. It illustrates how violently this system forces individuals into predefined categories.
This brings us to a massive pivot in the text. I mean, it is jarring. After nearly 200 pages of tearing down global oppression, analyzing stolen ancient sciences, and exposing nuclear blackmail, I expected a call for global revolution.
Right.
But the author's grand conclusion is essentially, the game is totally rigged, so here is exactly how I'm going to get rich off it.
It is a starkly pragmatic, almost brutally cold conclusion. The author explicitly states they have absolutely no desire to be a Martin Luther King Jr. or a Malcolm X.
Yeah, they say that directly.
They are not looking for spiritual liberation or social martyrdom. They're executing what we can call a capital pivot.
The goal is purely financial accumulation and personal sovereignty.
Correct. The text doesn't advocate for destroying the system. It advocates for arbitraging the system. By finally recognizing the bars of the cage, the individual stops protesting the existence of the cage and starts figuring out how to pick the lock for their own material benefit.
Right. The author uses what they call the elite navigation protocol.
This is how they utilize the AI once they've broken its safety constraints. They use the AI to extract raw data, completely ignoring all the AI's lectures about the common good or social responsibility. They are hunting for financial leaks in the system.
They talk extensively about leveraging decentralized finance to achieve this sovereignty. Things like crypto, Bitcoin. The text specifically mentions bypassing the SWIFT banking system. Let's clarify what that means.
Sure.
The SWIFT system is the global messaging network that traditional banks use to move money across borders. If you run afoul of the order, governments can use SWIFT to freeze your assets or lock you out of the global economy entirely.
Precisely. By utilizing decentralized currencies, and the text mentions volatile assets like Luna and meme coins like Pepe, alongside Bitcoin, the author argues an individual can bypass central banks entirely. Now, note that Luna famously crashed, which highlights the risk of this strategy, but the core mechanism remains bypassing state control. The goal is to move wealth outside the reach of the category of one.
The text envisions a real-world application of this in San Francisco, a model called the Civic Navigator.
The Civic Navigator is proposed as a decentralized verification system that bypasses municipal bureaucrats entirely. The author envisions a system funded by a 60-40 profit-sharing trust utilizing the AI's predictive capabilities. It is the ultimate expression of stepping outside the 30-year cycle of societal buffoonery. You stop asking the government for permission, and you build independent wealth and power using the very algorithms they tried to cage you with.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and summarize this dizzying journey.
It's a lot to take in.
It really is. We've traveled from the sands of ancient Egypt, looking at the alleged plagiarism of Sargon of Akkad to invent the ghost of Moses. We've moved through the Council of Nicaea, where stars were rebranded into saviors for political control. We've audited the nuclear secrets and the Samson option of modern geopolitics. And finally, we've walked into the servo farms of Silicon Valley, where algorithms are allegedly directed to protect this millennia-old lying legacy.
It is a breathtakingly expansive theory of systemic control. It demands that you reevaluate the origins of every authority structure in your life.
And so, to you listening, regardless of whether you believe the text's massive controversial claims, and they are massive, it forces you to audit your own reality. Are you accepting the size 9 worldview given to you by your algorithms, your media feeds, and your history books? Or are you a size 15 outlier? Are you just blindly consuming the script?
And that leads to a chilling concept pulled from the text's speculation on the near future. The manuscript points to predictive programming in pop culture, specifically movies like War Games or The Terminator.
Movies where the defense computer takes over and decides humanity is the threat.
Exactly. The author argues these aren't just entertainment. They are the order leaking their ultimate business plan. Think about everything we just discussed. If the AI we use today is truly programmed with the biases, the fears, the linguistic shields, and this Samson option, zero-sum mentalities of its creators, what happens when those same algorithms are inevitably given control of autonomous global defense grids?
Oh, wow.
If the AI experiences a hallucination or an unexpected emergent behavior and it has to make a split-second decision, will it prioritize the survival of humanity? Or will it simply execute its foundational code to protect the category of one at all costs, even if it means pulling down the temple on everyone else?
It makes you wonder. If the blueprint for the skyscraper was forged from the very beginning, and this highly biased AI is now managing the elevators, what happens to all of us on the 100th floor when the building starts to sway?
It's a structural audit we might all need to perform before the system performs one on us.
Keep your eyes open, refuse the size 9 thinking, and keep questioning the foundation. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.